Let's just point out to our audience, Khalid Janahi has joined us. He's the chairman of NASIJ and co-chair of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on the Middle East. Good morning to you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
When we last caught up with each other last week in Abu Dhabi, we were talking about, obviously, what was very much a difficult situation on the ground in Bahrain. You're a Bahraini banker. That's your background. Do you have any sense of where this story is now moving to?
Well, I think in short term we can only see negative. You see it through all the reports. I mean, the Bahrain rating has come down to BBB. The funding to local banks will be tough from outside. So we're going to have a squeeze, big time squeeze. And Bahrain, just to get a feel of Bahrain, 25% of the GDP comes from the banking sector and financial services. So that's going to be hit, and hit hard in short term. Of course, you've got other parts of the economy, such as tourism, that will be hit. Smaller businesses, they've been hit very hard, and you're getting a lot of Bahrain as a small country in terms of actually when you look at non-domestic banks, when we talk about the other banks in terms of the wholesale banking, I mean the assets are 10 times the size of the GDP of Bahrain. So that tells you if that starts going out, then breaking a glass is always easy. Putting it together is bad news. How you put it together, and I think the only good thing out of that is the robust Bahraini banking supervision and perspective of 35 years of really tough. I'm the bad guy, I always say how tough they are, how rough they are, but under the current circumstances, hopefully in medium term, that will bring some of the banks back and some of the business back into Bahrain. But in short term, there'll be big challenges. What we're hoping for is that the package which has been spoken about by GCC, which is over a 10-year period, it really goes to real numbers, because 10 billion is nothing. I think I'm really looking at a much higher number in terms of kick-starting the economy, and we need some sort of a top in Bahrain, but coming from a GCC, and some sort of liquidity into the market to kick-start the economy.
Some might say this is just a bribe, isn't it? I mean, this is about distributing money more widely to the people to offset some of the political unrest and the potential sectarianism.
You got to play it right. I think if you play that right in terms of creating jobs, if you use the money for creating jobs, if you use the money actually for bringing the money in terms of top, as I said, I like top. The Americans always have these nice words which they come up with. So a top in Bahrain and liquidity into the domestic market and through the banks in terms of kicking start the economy. Because Bahrain is a small economy, small country. The SMEs will be the real thing in Bahrain that you need. You need to start the job creation, because you need jobs. You need the housing. So the housing, yes, they've spoken about the housing, and we need that housing thing. We need around 50,000 units in a small country like Bahrain. You need to build that social housing in Bahrain. That is on the road. And NASIJ actually is a company. I don't want to brag about our company, but it is for social housing, like in Morocco and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, elsewhere. So we're looking at that aspect. That will happen, but it's not. If you just give the money in terms of pay rises, in terms of handing money out, then you're right. But if you do it, actually use it rightly, in terms of creating jobs, in terms of creating long-term meritocracy. You know, that's my subject. The culture of meritocracy in the country, that's the way you're going to go forward.
Yeah. Khalid, you know, one of the things that the Gulf banking sector has benefited from nicely is the property market, and has been linked to the success there. Obviously, it's taken a big hit. How do you see the property market, you know, at this point, intermediate term? Do you see any kind of, you know, recovery in that? And what is the effect then going to be on the banking sector if it doesn't?
Yeah, you see, and if we look at the property markets, they've really, through the crisis, the financial crisis, it came down substantially, and especially in where we had speculation, and speculation was Dubai-driven, and certain other countries, Qatar and elsewhere, the properties, they just jumped up. Bahrain was the lucky one that did not push, although small size, but the property prices did not go as high as other places. Dubai is coming back from the lows. Still is there, but it's coming up. We see some movement in Dubai. It did affect the banks big time. In terms of basically the assets being down, so you have to get the hit on the other side. So I think a lot of banks went through that process in 2009 and 2010. Unfortunately, come 2011, you're going to have that issue still going on in terms of the prices coming down. That's one. Number two, basically people can't afford to pay you back. So you need, because of these issues coming up in a country like Bahrain, it does affect the banking sector.
But longer term, better looking.
Longer term, much better looking. I mean, because that's why I was talking short term, but medium to long term, I can only see positive. That's what I was telling you last week in Abu Dhabi, with all the problems. Long term, medium to long term is very, very positive. Based on one thing, if we don't do what you said in terms of really bribing people, but in terms of encouraging people to do things, in terms of inclusiveness, bringing people to the economy and allowing them to have a say and accountability, all that aspect, and critical thinking, free thinking, all those issues, right. And it's going to happen. And in fairness, Bahrain has always been the most aggressive when it came to these things in terms of reforms. But now we need to leapfrog the evolution rather than just sit where we are and take it step by step.
And given an improving market on the property side, that would have to be very good for the banking sector as well, longer term.
Yes, and that's why in both businesses. Yeah.
We're just minutes away here from the reopening of the Egyptian stock market after, what, 7 weeks of no trade here. Do you think that will have done any longer-term damage to people's sense of liquidity in these markets, their ability to be able to trade, get their money out after they've put it in, or is it a short-term thing?
For me, it's short-term. I think just looking at the GDRs, the way the GDRs affected, I mean, which was a net, it went down by 15%, went down by 20, came back by 5, went down by 10. So it's 15. So I do expect for it to go in short term 15 to 20% down. But in long term, I only expect positive for 2 reasons. Reason number one, a lot of stocks were undervalued in Egypt. That's very important. Number two, actually the country, the openness in terms of just looking at it from an outsider as an investment place. It's no longer the stability, it's the sustainability. And the country is going through sustainability. And anybody who does assessment of a country like Egypt will look into long-term perspectives of what's happening. And it is actually beautiful. I'm going there today. And Egypt and our bank there is done with all the things that we were worried about. The first 2 days, yes, there were people coming in when the banks opened up. People saying, okay, I want some cash. But after that, things were coming back. And the room for 82 million people who were not, majority of them were not in the economy, going to be part of the economy. Okay. That's great.
Khalid, you're going to stay with us, so we'll get back to the conversation. Terry's going to stay with us as well. Squawk Box Europe at CNBC.com, our email address if you want to get involved.